In the glass towers of San Francisco's tech district, a quiet developer was about to face his greatest humiliation. What started as a routine demo day presentation took a shocking turn when he came face to face with his sister's public dismissal of his life's work. Adrian Kim wasn't your typical Silicon Valley entrepreneur. For 2 years, he had spent his life building Kairo, a mental wellness app in his cramped studio apartment, known for his unwavering belief that technology should heal rather than exploit. When he encountered Celina's brutal mockery calling his app stupid in front of hundreds of investors, he had no idea he was walking into the moment that would define his destiny. Adrian's quiet smile in response to her cruelty would lead to a tech industry revolution. What began as sibling rivalry would become a war for the soul of artificial intelligence. The entire wellness app industry would never be the same after Google's CEO personally validated the stupid app that prioritized human dignity over corporate profit. This is the story of how the underestimated younger brother didn't just prove his sister wrong, he redefined what success means in Silicon Valley, one ethical algorithm at a time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in the TechCrunch Disrupt demo hall buzzed like angry wasps, casting everything in that particular shade of startup white that makes everyone look either brilliant or dead. I was somewhere between the two, clutching my laptop with sweaty palms while my sister Celina commanded the stage like she was born for it. And that's why GlowPath isn't just another fitness app, she purred into the microphone, her voice smooth as the expensive whiskey she kept in her corner office. It's a lifestyle revolution. We're not tracking steps, we're tracking transformation. The audience ate it up. Investors leaned forward in their chairs, phones out, already calculating valuations. I watched from the back corner, my presentation slides feeling suddenly inadequate on my second-hand MacBook. Kairo, my emotional wellness app, seemed small next to her multimedia extravaganza complete with holographic projections and testimonials from influencers I'd never heard of. But then she did what Celina always did. She went for the Of course, not everyone understands the importance of scalable impact, she said, her eyes finding mine across the crowded room. Some people think building apps for feelings is revolutionary. My little brother Adrian, for instance, has been working on some kind of therapy chatbot for months now. The crowd chuckled, that polite startup laugh that cuts deeper than silence. I keep telling him, Adrian, honey, people don't want to pay for digital handholding. They want results. They want to look good, feel good, and share it with the world. But he's convinced his little pet project is going to change mental health forever. She paused for effect, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. It's honestly kind of sweet, and stupid, but mostly sweet. The laughter was louder this time, more genuine. I felt my face burning, the familiar cocktail of humiliation and rage that I'd been drinking since we were kids. Celina had always been the golden child, Harvard MBA featured on Forbes 30 Under 30, the sister who made our immigrant parents beam with pride at every family dinner. I was the one who dropped out of Stanford to work at a startup that folded within 6 months, the one who got fired from Facebook for blowing the whistle on their data collection practices, the one who spent the last year unemployed, building Kairo in my studio apartment while surviving on ramen and student loan forbearance. But I wasn't the one manipulating user data to inflate engagement metrics. I wasn't the one using deceptive dark patterns to keep people addicted to artificial dopamine hits. I wasn't the one who'd built an empire on the psychological equivalent of digital cocaine. That was all Celina. I closed my laptop and slipped toward the exit, my presentation slot suddenly feeling like a death sentence. Why bother? The room was already buzzing about GlowPath's Series B funding round. Nobody wanted to hear about ethical AI or emotional intelligence or the careful, methodical way I'd built Kairo's neural learning model to actually help people process trauma instead of just masking it. Adrian, a voice called out behind me. I turned to see Marcus Chen, one of the accelerator organizers, jogging over with that apologetic smile that meant bad news. Hey buddy, we're running behind schedule. I'm afraid we're going to have to cut your presentation slot. Of course they were. It's fine, I said, forcing my voice to stay level. I understand. Look, we'll get you on the next demo day. Okay? Your app sounds really interesting. Mental health is such a hot space right now. Hot space? Like human suffering was a market trend to capitalize on. I nodded and pushed through the glass doors into the San Francisco afternoon, the fog rolling in from the bay like a gray blanket. My phone buzzed with notifications, people tagging me in posts about Celina's presentation, offering their condolences with crying laughing emoji. But there was one notification that made me stop walking. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Kairo@google.com, subject line, regarding Kairo, confidential discussion. I almost deleted it assuming it was spam, but something made me click. Mr. Kim, I hope this message finds you well. I recently had the opportunity to beta test your application through our internal innovation pipeline. I believe there may be significant synergies between your work and our current research initiatives. Would you be available for a brief call this week? Dr. Kairo Raso, Director of Ethical Innovation, Google X. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Someone at Google had been testing Kairo. Someone high-ranking enough to have a director title had not only used my app, but thought it was worth reaching out about. I looked back through the glass doors at the demo hall, where Celina was probably still holding court, basking in the afterglow of her performance. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted: validation, attention, and another round of funding to fuel her empire of engineered addiction. But for the first time in months, I was smiling, because while she'd been performing for the crowd, I'd been building something real, something that Google's innovation team had apparently noticed, something that didn't need flashy presentations or influencer testimonials to prove its worth. I started walking toward the BART station, already composing my reply to Dr. Raso in my head. Demo day was over, but my real presentation was just beginning. The Google X campus looked like what happened when architects took too much acid and decided to design the future. Glass and steel twisted into impossible shapes, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens that probably cost more than most people's houses. I sat in my Honda Civic in the parking lot for 10 minutes, trying to convince myself I belonged here. Dr. Kairo Raso met me in the lobby wearing jeans and a Stanford hoodie, which somehow made her more intimidating than if she'd been in a business suit. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with laugh lines around her eyes and calluses on her fingertips that suggested she still coded despite her executive title. Adrian, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. I hope the drive down wasn't too brutal. Just the usual Bay Area traffic nightmare, I replied, trying to match her casual tone. She led me through corridors lined with whiteboards covered in equations I couldn't begin to understand, past rooms where engineers hunched over quantum computers and VR headsets. The whole place hummed with the kind of focused energy that made my skin prickle with excitement. Coffee? She asked, stopping at a machine that looked like it belonged on a space station. Please. She programmed the machine with the precision of someone who'd spent years perfecting her caffeine ritual, then handed me a cup that was probably worth more than my rent. So, she said, settling into a chair across from me in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked the bay. Tell me about Marcus. I blinked. Marcus? Marcus Rodriguez, 23 years old, college dropout, started using Kairo 6 weeks ago after his 3rd panic attack in a month. Used to spend 4 hours a day on social media, now he's down to 30 minutes. Sleeping better, stopped binge drinking, started going to therapy. My mouth went dry. We've been monitoring your beta users, Adrian, with their permission of course, full disclosure and opt-in consent. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Do you know what makes your app different from the hundreds of other mental health apps flooding the market? I shook my head, afraid to break whatever spell was happening. It doesn't try to fix people, it doesn't promise overnight transformation or life-changing breakthroughs. It just listens, really listens, and then it helps them listen to themselves. She pulled out a tablet and swiped through charts and graphs that mapped the emotional journeys of my users. Your neural learning model isn't trying to optimize for engagement or retention, it's optimizing for genuine emotional growth. That's revolutionary, Adrian. And it's exactly what we've been looking for. What do you mean? Google's been working on emotional AI for years, but we keep running into the same problem. How do you build technology that actually helps people instead of just exploiting their vulnerabilities? How do you create genuine value instead of addictive distraction? She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling campus below. I used to be a psychiatrist, she said quietly. Lost a patient to suicide 5 years ago, a brilliant young man. A lot like you, actually. He was struggling with depression and anxiety, but he was functional, high-achieving. The kind of person who suffers in silence because they don't fit the stereotype of mental illness. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. He was using a popular meditation app, one of those mindfulness platforms that promise to solve all your problems with 10 minutes of daily practice. The app kept sending him notifications about his streak, gamifying his recovery, like it was some kind of achievement system. When he missed a few days during a particularly bad episode, the app started sending him guilt-inducing messages about getting back on track. She turned back to me, her eyes sharp with old pain. He killed himself on a day when the app sent him a notification saying he'd fallen behind on his mental health goals. His suicide note mentioned feeling like he was failing even at being depressed correctly. The conference room felt suddenly too small, too bright. That's when I left medicine and came to tech. Because I realized we were building tools that were making people sicker, not better. And then I found Kairo. She sat back down and opened her laptop, showing me lines of code I recognized as my own. Your emotion tracking algorithm doesn't judge or score or rank. It just observes patterns and helps users understand their own emotional rhythms. Your AI doesn't try to be a therapist, it helps people become their own therapists. And your data architecture. She shook her head in what looked like admiration. Full local processing, minimal cloud storage, user-controlled data deletion. You've built something that actually respects human dignity. Do you understand how rare that is? I was quiet for a long moment, processing what she was telling me. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I could hear Celina's voice from the demo day. Stupid, pet project, digital hand-holding. What are you proposing? I asked finally. A partnership. Google provides resources, infrastructure, and distribution. You maintain full creative control and ownership of the core technology. We help you scale Kairo to reach the people who need it most, and we learn from your approach to build better emotional AI across all our products. She slid a folder across the table. This is a preliminary licensing agreement. Take it home. Review it with a lawyer. Think about it. But Adrian, I looked up from the papers. The world needs what you've built. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I drove home through the evening fog, the folder sitting on my passenger seat like a sleeping bomb. My phone buzzed with notifications, more posts about Celina's demo day triumph, tech bloggers analyzing Glowpath's market potential, investors sliding into her DMs with funding offers. But tucked away in Google's innovation labs, someone had been quietly testing my work. Someone who understood that real innovation wasn't about flashy presentations or viral marketing campaigns. It was about solving actual human problems with patience, empathy, and respect. I thought about Marcus Rodriguez, whoever he was, sleeping better at night because of something I'd built in my cramped apartment. I thought about Dr. Rayo's patient, lost to technology that treated human suffering like a game to be won. And I thought about Celina building her empire on engineered addiction while dismissing the very idea that technology could be used to heal instead of harm. My phone rang. Unknown number. Adrian, it's Eli Nwoko. I used to work at Glowpath. We need to talk. Eli Nwoko looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles under his eyes, coffee stains on his hoodie, the kind of nervous energy that came from carrying secrets too heavy for one person to bear. We met at a diner in the Mission, the kind of place where startup bros never ventured, and conversations could disappear into the ambient noise of sizzling grease and clinking dishes. I know this sounds paranoid, he said, sliding into the booth across from me, but I think they might be monitoring my communications. That's why I called from a burner phone. I almost laughed. This was San Francisco, not some Cold War thriller. But then I saw the flash drive he slid across the table, and the laughter died in my throat. What's on there? Everything. he said, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup like it was an anchor. Internal emails, user data analysis, A/B testing results, code repository, 3 years of documentation showing exactly how GlowPath manipulates its users. I picked up the drive, surprised by how light it felt. Such a small thing to hold such weight. Why are you giving this to me? Eli's laugh was bitter. Because I can't sleep at night. Because I got into tech to build things that helped people, not to optimize human misery for profit. And because, he paused, studying my face. Because I've been following your work on Kairo. I know what you're trying to do. How do you know about Kairo? I was one of your beta testers, used a fake email, dummy account. Your app actually helped me through some dark times after I quit GlowPath. Real help, not just, whatever the hell we were building over there. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you know what GlowPath's real product is, Adrian? It's not fitness tracking or lifestyle optimization. It's addiction. Pure pharmaceutical-grade digital addiction. I thought about Celina's presentation, her talk of transformation and lifestyle revolution, the slick marketing, the influencer testimonials, the way she'd positioned GlowPath as a force for positive change. The core algorithm is designed to create what we called optimal dissatisfaction. Eli continued. Users never quite reach their goals, but they always feel like they're just one more workout, one more meal plan, one more premium feature away from success. The app deliberately sets unrealistic expectations and then offers paid solutions to close the gap. He pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots of internal Slack conversations, messages from Celina to her engineering team, asking them to increase friction at key engagement points and optimize for maximum user anxiety around goal completion. This is from last month, he said, pointing to a message thread. Celina wanted us to implement what she called shame notifications. If users missed their daily goals, the app would send push notifications designed to make them feel guilty, not motivated, guilty. The psychology team did studies showing that guilt-based engagement increased daily active users by 37%. My stomach turned. I thought about Dr. Rao's story, her patient, who'd killed himself after an app made him feel like he was failing at recovery. There's more, Eli said. The food tracking feature deliberately miscalculates calorie burns to make users think they need more premium features. The social component promotes comparison with other users who are actually paid actors with fake progress stories. And the meditation module. He shook his head. The meditation module tracks stress levels and deliberately increases anxiety-inducing content when users are most vulnerable. It's designed to create a dependency cycle where people need the app to manage the psychological distress the app itself is creating. I stared at the flash drive, understanding finally why Eli looked so haunted. How long has this been going on? Since the beginning. Celina brought in a team of behavioral psychologists and neuroscientists to design what she called optimal user manipulation protocol. They studied gambling addiction, social media dependency, even cult indoctrination techniques. The goal was to create an app that users literally couldn't stop using, even when it was making them miserable. He pulled up another screenshot, this one showing user retention metrics broken down by psychological vulnerability. Categories like body dysmorphia, perfectionism, and social anxiety, with corresponding engagement optimization strategies. The worst part, it's working. GlowPath has some of the highest user retention rates in the wellness space. People are spending hours a day on an app that's systematically undermining their mental health, and they're paying premium subscriptions for the privilege. I thought about the demo day, the investors leaning forward with dollar signs in their eyes. They weren't just funding a fitness app, they were funding a psychological exploitation machine. Why haven't you gone public with this? I tried, Eli said. Reached out to TechCrunch, Wired, a few other publications. But GlowPath's PR team is ruthless. They have relationships with editors, threats of legal action, dirt on journalists. And Celina. She's very good at making people believe she's one of the good guys. I remembered the way she'd positioned herself at the demo day, talking about empowering users and democratizing wellness. The way she'd dismissed my work as naive, while secretly building something far more sinister. "There's something else," Eli said, his voice barely audible above the diner noise. "Celina's been asking questions about Kairo. She had me do some competitive analysis a few weeks ago. She's planning something." My blood went cold. What kind of something? I'm not sure, but I overheard her on a call with the product team, talking about emotional intelligence features and wellness too. She specifically mentioned your app by name. The flash drive felt suddenly heavy in my pocket. I thought about the Google meeting. Rayo's praise for Cairo's ethical approach, the licensing agreement sitting on my kitchen table. I thought about Marcus Rodriguez and all the other users who'd found genuine help through my app, and I thought about Celina, preparing to weaponize emotional vulnerability the same way she'd weaponized body image and social comparison. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked, tapping the flash drive. "I don't know," Eli admitted. "I just know it needs to see the light of day before more people get hurt. Before she has a chance to corrupt whatever you're building." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what he'd shared settling between us. Outside, the San Francisco fog was rolling in, turning the city into something soft and indistinct. But inside the diner, everything felt sharp and clear. "There's one more thing," Eli said, as we prepared to leave. "The Series B funding Celina's been talking about. It's not as solid as she's making it seem. The lead investor, Raj Shah, has been asking hard questions about user retention and long-term sustainability. If this information became public at the wrong time, he didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood. Glowpath's empire was built on a foundation of psychological manipulation and user exploitation. All it would take was the right push at the right moment, and the whole thing would come crashing down. I walked back to my car through the Mission streets, the flash drive burning like a coal in my pocket. Somewhere across the city, Celina was probably celebrating her demo day success, basking in the afterglow of investor attention and media coverage. She had no idea that her former employee had just handed me the keys to her destruction. She had no idea that while she'd been calling my work stupid, I'd been building something that actually helped people heal instead of exploiting their pain. And she definitely had no idea that Google was about to change everything. I started the engine and drove home through the fog, already planning my next move. The game was no longer about sibling rivalry or wounded pride. It was about protecting something pure from someone who'd forgotten the difference between helping people and harvesting their suffering. The war for the future of mental health technology was about to begin, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight back. The email arrived at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, sent from an address that made my coffee go cold in my mouth. Events, out googleinnovationsummit.com. Subject line: personal invitation, Google Innovation Summit. I'd been awake anyway, hunched over my laptop in the blue glow of code reviews and user feedback reports. Cairo's latest update had pushed our beta user count past 10,000, and the engagement metrics were unlike anything I'd seen in my career. Not the manipulative engagement that Eli had shown me from Glowpath's playbook, but genuine sustained usage that correlated with improved mental health outcomes. The invitation was signed by Dr. Kavita Rao, but the language was formal, corporate. "We would be honored to have you present Cairo's innovative approach to ethical AI at this year's summit. Your presentation slot is confirmed for November 15th with a potential licensing announcement to follow." Potential licensing announcement. The words hit me like a shot of espresso mixed with pure adrenaline. I read the email 17 times before it sank in. Google Innovation Summit wasn't some developer conference or startup showcase. It was the place where Google unveiled the technologies that would shape the next decade. Previous years had seen the announcement of quantum computing breakthroughs, autonomous vehicle partnerships, and AI systems that had rewritten entire industries. And they wanted me there, not as an audience member or a curious observer, but as a presenter. As someone whose work mattered enough to warrant a stage and a spotlight. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Congratulations on the Google invite. We should talk." "Celina, Of course she'd found out already. The Silicon Valley gossip network moved faster than fiber optic cables. And news of Google partnerships leaked like water through a broken dam. She probably knew about my summit invitation before I'd finished reading the email. I stared at the text for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. 3 dots appeared and disappeared as she typed and deleted messages. Finally, another text came through. I know things have been weird between us, but I'm proud of you. Really. The words felt hollow, performative. Like everything else about Celina, they were calculated for maximum impact with minimal sincerity. I could practically hear her practicing the message in her head, workshopping the tone to hit just the right note of sisterly affection mixed with humble acknowledgement. But there was something else in that message. Something that felt less like congratulations and more like reconnaissance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Another text. Maybe we could grab coffee before your big presentation. I'd love to hear about what you're working on. There it was. The real reason for her sudden interest in reconciliation. Eli had been right. She was planning something. The competitive analysis he'd mentioned, the questions about emotional intelligence features, the sudden pivot toward wellness too. She wasn't congratulating me. She was gathering intelligence. I deleted her messages without responding and opened my laptop to the folder containing Eli's flash drive contents. Over the past week, I'd been systematically reviewing the evidence he'd provided, and the picture that emerged was even darker than his initial summary had suggested. GlowPath wasn't just manipulating user behavior, they were conducting unauthorized psychological experiments on vulnerable populations, A/B testing different methods of inducing anxiety, measuring the correlation between user distress and premium subscription conversions, tracking the effectiveness of shame-based retention strategies across different demographic groups. The data was damning, but it was also strategically incomplete. Eli had been careful to protect certain sources and redact information that could be traced back to him. Any journalist or regulator would need additional verification before publishing or acting on the allegation, which meant Celina was still safe. For now, her empire of engineered addiction could continue operating while she pivoted toward whatever new exploitation strategy she had planned. I thought about Marcus Rodriguez and the 9,000 other Kairo users who'd found genuine help through my app. I thought about Dr. Rao's patient, lost to technology that gamified human suffering. I thought about all the people currently trapped in GlowPath's psychological manipulation matrix, convinced they were working toward wellness while being systematically undermined. And I thought about the Google Innovation Summit, the stage where I could present a different vision for what technology could be, not a tool for exploitation, but a genuine force for healing and growth. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number, but this time the message was different. Adrian, this is Raj Shah from Pinnacle Ventures. I'd like to discuss potential investment opportunities in Kairo. Are you available for lunch this week? Raj Shah, Celina's lead investor, the man whose Series B funding was supposed to catapult GlowPath into the next tier of unicorn startups. And now he was reaching out to me, just days after the Google invitation became public knowledge. The timing wasn't coincidental. In the venture capital ecosystem, information traveled through networks of interconnected relationships and mutual dependencies. If Raj was contacting me, it meant he'd heard something that made him question his investment in Celina's company, or it meant Celina had sent him to extract information about my Google deal. I set the phone aside and walked to my apartment window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. Somewhere in those glittering towers, Celina was probably strategizing her next move, planning how to position herself for whatever announcement I was going to make at the summit, figuring out how to leverage our family connection for maximum benefit, while minimizing the threat I represented to her empire. But she was operating with incomplete information. She knew about the Google invitation, but she didn't know about the licensing deal Dr. Rao had proposed. She knew I was building something in the mental health space, but she didn't understand the ethical framework that made Kairo fundamentally different from her manipulative approach. Most importantly, she didn't know about Eli's flash drive. She had no idea that her former employee had documented years of psychological exploitation and handed me the evidence that could bring down everything she'd built. I opened my laptop and began typing a response to Dr. Rao's invitation, not just accepting the presentation slot, but proposing something bigger, a comprehensive unveiling of ethical AI principles that would set new industry standards, a public commitment to transparency and user protection that would force every mental health app to choose between exploitation and integrity. As I wrote, I could feel something shifting inside me. The quiet, defensive posture I'd maintained for years was giving way to something more assertive, more dangerous. For too long, I'd been content to work in the shadows while Celina basked in the spotlight. I'd accepted her dismissals and public humiliations because I believed that good work would eventually speak for itself, that patience and integrity would triumph over flash and manipulation. But watching her build an empire on engineered human suffering had taught me something important. Sometimes good people need to fight back. Sometimes the only way to protect something pure is to destroy the forces that threaten to corrupt it. The Google Innovation Summit would be my coming out party, the moment when I stepped out of Celina's shadow and into my own light. But it would also be something else. The opening shot in a war for the soul of technology itself. I finished the email to Dr. Rao and hit send. Then I opened a new message to Raj Shah, accepting his lunch invitation. If Celina wanted to play games, I was ready to show her what real strategy looked like. The summit was 3 weeks away, 3 weeks to prepare for the presentation that would define my career and potentially reshape an entire industry. 3 weeks to decide whether I would take the high road or finally give Celina the war she'd been asking for. The Google Innovation Summit took place in a building that looked like it had been designed by aliens who'd studied human architecture through Instagram posts. All curves and impossible angles, glass that shifted color depending on the viewing angle, and enough smart surfaces to power a small city. I stood backstage, watching through the monitors as other presenters unveiled breakthrough technologies that would probably seem primitive within a decade. My hands weren't shaking anymore. That was the first surprise. 3 weeks of preparation had burned away the nervous energy, leaving behind something calmer and more focused. I'd rehearsed this presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep. But more importantly, I'd refined my message until it cut like a laser through all the noise and confusion of the tech industry. Adrian Kim, you're up in 5 minutes, the stage manager said, adjusting my microphone pack with the efficiency of someone who'd handled hundreds of nervous presenters. Through the backstage curtain, I could see the audience. 1,500 of the most influential people in technology, their faces lit by the soft glow of tablets and phones as they lived tweeted quotes and shared reaction gifs. I spotted venture capitalists I'd only seen in TechCrunch articles, CEOs whose companies had shaped the digital landscape, researchers whose papers had laid the foundation for entire industries. And in the third row, wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent, sat Celina. She'd arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that drew subtle attention without disrupting the proceeding. Classic Celina, always aware of her positioning, always conscious of how she appeared to the room. But there was something different about her posture, a tension in her shoulders that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable being here. Good. She should be nervous. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed through the auditorium. Please welcome Adrian Kim, founder of Kairo and the architect of next-generation ethical AI. I walked onto the stage to polite applause, the kind of measured response that said the audience was reserving judgment until they heard what I had to say. The lights were brighter than I'd expected, but somehow they felt welcoming rather than intimidating. 2 years ago, I began, clicking to my first slide. My best friend killed himself. The applause died instantly. The casual tablet tapping stopped. Even the live stream comments seemed to pause as 1,500 people suddenly focused on something they hadn't expected to hear at a tech conference. Jamie was a brilliant programmer, the kind of person who could see elegant solutions to impossible problems. He was also struggling with depression and anxiety, using one of the most popular mental health apps on the market to try to manage his symptoms. I clicked to the next slide, showing a screenshot of a meditation app's notification. This is the last message Jamie received from that app. It congratulated him on being only 3% away from his wellness goal, and offered him a premium subscription to unlock his full potential. He killed himself 6 hours later. The auditorium was silent now, the kind of complete attention that money couldn't buy and marketing couldn't manufacture. That app wasn't trying to help Jamie recover. It was designed to keep him engaged, to generate revenue from his suffering, to transform his mental health journey into a profitable subscription service. And it's not alone. The mental health app industry has built its business model on the systematic exploitation of human vulnerability. I clicked through slides, showing user interface patterns, engagement metrics, psychological manipulation technique, the same evidence Eli had provided, but contextualized within a broader framework of technological ethics. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can build technology that actually heals instead of harvesting. We can create AI that empowers users instead of exploiting. We can choose integrity over revenue, empathy over engagement. The next slide showed Kairo's interface. Clean, uncluttered, designed for reflection rather than addiction. This is what ethical AI looks like. No dark patterns, no manipulation metrics, no psychological exploitation. Just a tool that helps people understand themselves better and develop genuine emotional resilience. I glanced at Celina in the third row. Her face was carefully neutral, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was probably already figuring out how to position Glowpath as an ethical alternative, how to rebrand her manipulation engine as a wellness revolution. Which brings me to today's announcement. I continued, clicking to a slide with the Google logo. I'm proud to announce that Kairo has entered into a comprehensive licensing partnership with Google, aimed at establishing new industry standards for ethical AI and mental health applications. The applause was immediate and sustained, but I wasn't finished. This partnership isn't just about scaling one app, it's about proving that ethical technology can be profitable, that genuine help can be more valuable than artificial engagement, that we can build a digital ecosystem based on human dignity rather than psychological exploitation. I clicked the final slide, showing a framework for ethical AI development that Dr. Rao and I had refined over weeks of collaboration. These principles, transparency, user agency, genuine benefit, and measurable wellness outcomes, will be integrated into all of Google's health-related AI products. And we're making this framework available to every developer, every company, every entrepreneur who wants to build technology that actually helps people. The standing ovation started somewhere in the middle of the auditorium and spread outward like a wave. I stood at the podium watching 1,500 people rise to their feet and felt something I'd never experienced before. The intoxicating rush of being truly seen and understood. But what made the moment perfect wasn't the applause or the recognition. It was the expression on Celina's face as she remained seated while everyone around her stood and cheered. For the first time in our lives, she was the one being left behind while I moved forward. As I walked off the stage, my phone was already buzzing with notification, interview requests, partnership inquiries, congratulations from people I'd never met, but who suddenly wanted to be associated with my success. The tech press was dissecting my presentation in real time, and the ethical AI framework was already trending on social media. Dr. O met me in the green room, her smile wide enough to power the building. That, she said, was exactly what the world needed to hear. Think it'll make a difference? Adrian, you just redefined what success looks like in our industry. You showed 1,500 of the most influential people in tech that there's a better way to build the future. Of course it's going to make a difference. My phone rang. Raj Shah, the investor who'd reached out for lunch last week. I'd never responded to his message, but apparently that didn't matter anymore. Adrian, he said, his voice smooth with the particular charm that venture capitalists deployed when they smelled opportunity. Incredible presentation. Truly visionary. I'd love to discuss how Pinnacle Ventures might support Kairo's next phase of growth. The same man who'd been funding Celina's psychological exploitation machine was now pivoting toward my ethical alternative without missing a beat. It would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. I appreciate the interest, I said, but we're not looking for external investment at this time. Of course, but perhaps we could explore some kind of strategic partnership, maybe over lunch next week. Through the green room window, I could see Celina pushing through the crowd of conference attendees, her blazer wrinkled and her perfect composure finally starting to crack. She was trying to intercept journalists, attempting to insert herself into conversations about ethical AI and mental health technology, but for the first time in her career, nobody was listening. The spotlight had moved on, leaving her standing in shadows she'd never learned to navigate. "I'll have my team reach out," I told Raj, ending the call before he could respond. The war wasn't over. If anything, my presentation had just declared it officially begun, but for the first time in my life, I was winning. And based on the panic I could see spreading across Celina's face, she was finally beginning to understand what that meant. The video appeared on LinkedIn at 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday, uploaded with the kind of desperate urgency that suggested someone had been awake for days, pacing their apartment and rehearsing their line. Celina's face filled the frame, makeup slightly smudged, her usually perfect hair showing signs of stress-induced neglect. Behind her, the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Soma loft revealed the San Francisco skyline glittering like scattered diamonds. "I want to address some recent conversations about ethics and technology," she began, her voice carrying that particular tremor that comes from trying to control something that's already spiraling out of control. As someone who's dedicated her career to empowering people through innovative wellness solutions, I've been deeply moved by the important questions being raised about our industry's responsibility to users. I watched from my kitchen table, coffee growing cold as I absorbed the spectacle of my sister attempting to reinvent herself in real time. The comments were already rolling in, hundreds of them, and the tone was not what she'd probably hoped for. The truth is, building technology that genuinely helps people has always been my primary motivation. With GlowPath, we've worked tirelessly to create tools that inspire positive lifestyle changes and support users on their wellness journey. But I recognize that the industry as a whole hasn't always lived up to its potential to create meaningful impact. The camera work was shaky, obviously shot on her phone without professional lighting or equipment. Everything about the video screamed amateur hour, which was jarring coming from someone who'd built her brand on polished perfection. This wasn't Celina the CEO or Celina the thought leader. This was Celina the despot. I want to be clear, GlowPath has never and will never engage in the kind of manipulative practices that have unfortunately become common in some wellness applications. Our team is committed to transparency, user agency, and genuine benefit principles that align perfectly with the ethical framework my brother Adrian outlined in his remarkable presentation at the Google Innovation Summit. There it was, the pivot I'd been expecting. Celina couldn't attack my success directly, not when the entire tech industry was celebrating the ethical AI framework and the Google partnership. So instead, she was trying to position herself as an early adopter, a like-minded innovator who'd always shared my value. The comments section told a different story. Someone had posted screenshots of GlowPath's notification patterns, highlighting the shame-based messaging strategies Eli had documented. Another commenter linked to a Reddit thread where users described feeling worse about themselves after using the app. A tech journalist had shared preliminary findings from an investigation into wellness app manipulation tactics, with GlowPath prominently featured as a case study. But the most damaging comment came from an account I recognized, Eli Nwoko, using his real name and his former title at GlowPath. I worked on GlowPath's core engagement algorithms for 2 years. This video is damage control, not disclosure. The psychological manipulation techniques Celina is denying were explicitly requested in internal emails I can provide to journalists. Users deserve to know the truth about how their mental health data has been weaponized for profit. The thread beneath Eli's comment exploded with responses. Former GlowPath employees corroborating his claims, users sharing their own experiences with the app's addictive design pattern, tech reporters asking for interviews and requesting documentation. Within 6 hours, the video had generated more negative attention than Celina had received in her entire career. Every major tech publication was covering the story, not as a profile of an innovative CEO, but as an investigation into unethical practices in the wellness app industry. My phone rang. "Dr. Rao, have you seen the news about GlowPath?" she asked without preamble. "I'm watching it unfold in real time. TechCrunch is running a deep dive tomorrow morning. They've been fact-checking the allegations from your sister's former employees, and apparently they have internal documents confirming the psychological manipulation strategies. This is going to be bigger than just one company, Adrian. It's going to reshape how people think about mental health technology. I refreshed Celina's LinkedIn post. The view count had climbed past 50,000, but the like-to-comment ratio was catastrophic. For every supportive reaction, there were dozens of critical responses calling for transparency, accountability, and user protection. There's something else, Dr. Rao continued. I just got off a call with our legal team. Based on the evidence that's coming to light, Google is considering a formal statement about ethical standards in health technology partnerships. We want to make sure other companies understand that manipulation tactics like glow paths are disqualifying factors for any future collaboration. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Google wasn't just distancing themselves from unethical practices, they were using my partnership as the standard for what acceptable behavior looked like. Any company that wanted to work with the tech giant would need to demonstrate the same commitment to user protection and psychological safety that I'd built into Kairo. That means you've essentially created a new set of industry requirements overnight. Companies will need to choose between exploitative practices and access to the most important technology ecosystem in the world. I hung up and walked to my window, looking out at the city where both my sister and I had built our career. Somewhere in this maze of glass and ambition, Celina was probably strategizing her next move, trying to figure out how to salvage a company that had just been exposed as fundamentally toxic. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." For the first time in days, I smiled, because Celina had finally said something I agreed with completely. This had gone too far, years too far. Too far beyond the point where she could manipulate her way out of accountability. Too far beyond the possibility of redemption through clever PR and strategic pivots. But it hadn't gone far enough yet. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to every journalist who'd reached out to me over the past week. Not to attack Celina directly, I didn't need to. The evidence was speaking for itself, and the tech community was drawing its own conclusions about the kind of company she'd built. Instead, I wanted to talk about the future, about what the industry could become if we chose empathy over exploitation, if we measured success by user well-being instead of engagement metrics, if we built technology that elevated human dignity instead of harvesting human weakness. As I wrote, I could hear my phone buzzing with notifications, more interview requests, more partnership inquiries, more congratulations from people who understood that something important was happening. The conversation was shifting, and I was suddenly at the center of it. But the most satisfying notification came from TechCrunch. Exclusive, internal documents reveal systematic user manipulation at wellness startup GlowPath. The article went live at exactly midnight Pacific time. By morning, Celina's empire would be nothing but rubble and regret. And for the first time in my life, I would be the sibling standing in the light while she scrambled to escape the shadows of her own making. The war was almost over, and I had won it without firing a single shot. The coffee shop where Celina had chosen to meet looked like it had been designed by someone who thought rustic authenticity meant charging $18 for oat milk lattes served in mason jars. She'd picked a corner table away from the window, probably hoping to avoid the tech journalists who'd been trailing her since the TechCrunch expose went viral 3 days ago. She looked smaller than I remember. Not physically. Celina had always been tall, commanding, the kind of presence that filled rooms and demanded attention. But something essential had diminished. Her designer blazer hung slightly loose, her perfect posture had developed a subtle hunch, and her eyes carried the particular exhaustion that comes from fighting a war you're already lost. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. Her voice was careful, measured, stripped of the confident swagger that had defined her public persona for years. "I wasn't sure you would." I studied her face, looking for traces of the sister I'd grown up with, beneath the layers of corporate ambition and calculated charm. The Celina who'd taught me how to code when I was 12, who'd stayed up all night helping me debug my first program, who'd once believed that technology could genuinely make the world better. "The board voted me out yesterday," she continued, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup like it was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become liquid. Effective immediate. Raji orchestrated the whole thing. Apparently he's been positioning himself for a takeover since the Google announcement. They're bringing in a new CEO next week, someone with crisis management experience. I'd seen the news buried in the business section of the Chronicle, a single paragraph noting the leadership transition at Glowpath without mentioning the scandal that had precipitated it. Corporate media still handled tech executive departures with the delicate euphemisms usually reserved for royal family embarrassments. "I'm sorry," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. "Are you?" Her laugh was bitter, hollow, "because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you orchestrated this whole thing perfectly. The ethical AI framework, the Google partnership, the carefully timed exposure of our internal practices. It's brilliant. Real. You managed to destroy my company while positioning yourself as the moral authority of the industry." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "You think I planned this? Didn't you?" "Come on, Adrian. The timing is too perfect to be coincidental. You present your little ethics manifesto at the exact moment when my former employees decide to go public with allegations about Glowpath. You just happen to have a Google partnership ready to announce right when the industry was looking for an alternative to exploitative wellness apps." She air-quoted the word exploitative with the kind of disdain usually reserved for people who complained about free market capitalism. "I've been building Kairo for 2 years," I said quietly. "The Google partnership developed because Dr. Rao recognized something genuine in what I was creating. And Eli came to me because he couldn't sleep at night, knowing what your company was doing to vulnerable people." "Eli," she practically spat the name. "That sanctimonious little..." She caught herself glancing around the coffee shop to make sure no one was listening. "He signed NDAs, Adrian, non-disclosure agreements that specifically prohibited him from sharing internal information with competitors or journalists. He violated his contract. To expose psychological manipulation that was harming people. That's called whistleblowing, Celina. It's protected speech. It's corporate espionage. And you benefited from it." I stared at her, trying to understand how someone so intelligent could have such a comprehensive blind spot about her own behavior. "Do you actually believe that? Do you honestly think you're the victim here?" Her facade cracked just slightly, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "I built something incredible, Adrian. Glowpath helped millions of people get healthier, stronger, more confident. We created tools that actually changed lives. You created tools that exploited psychological vulnerabilities for profit. You turned human suffering into a revenue stream. Every business does that. Every company in Silicon Valley optimizes for user engagement. We just did it better than anyone else. That's exactly the problem." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 25 years of sibling rivalry settling between us like sediment in still water. I could see her processing what I'd said, the implications slowly penetrating the layers of rationalization she'd built around her choices. "So what now?" she asked finally. "You've won. You're the ethical tech darling, the poster boy for responsible innovation. I'm unemployable in the industry I helped build. What more do you want?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a message I'd received that morning from Marcus Rodriguez, the beta user Rao had mentioned during our first meeting. He'd sent a photo of himself crossing the finish line at the San Francisco Marathon, a race he'd trained for using Kairo's emotional regulation techniques to manage the anxiety that had previously kept him from pursuing his goal. "I want you to understand what we could have built together," I said. "If you'd chosen to help people instead of exploiting them, if you'd measured success by wellness outcomes instead of engagement metrics, if you'd remembered why we both got into technology in the first place." She looked at the photo for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. Not quite remorse. Celina had never been good at admitting mistakes, but maybe the beginning of understanding. "I can't undo what I built," she said quietly. "The algorithms, the manipulation techniques, the psychological exploitation. It's all out there now. Other companies will copy our methods, refine them, make them even more effective. I may have lost control of Glowpath, but the damage is already spreading through the industry. Then help me stop it." She looked up sharply. "What?" Testify before Congress when they investigate wellness app practices. Consult with the FTC on regulation frameworks. Use your knowledge of manipulation techniques to help build defenses against them. You understand this stuff better than anyone. Use that understanding to fix what you broke. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the sister I remembered. The one who'd believed in using technology to solve problems instead of creating them. But then her corporate instincts reasserted themselves. And destroy my reputation completely, admit publicly that everything I built was designed to harm people. Adrian, I'd never work in tech again. Maybe that's for the best. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Celina's eyes flashed with the old anger, the competitive fire that had driven her to success, and ultimately to destruction. Easy for you to say. You're the golden boy now. The ethical innovator with a Google partnership and a platform to preach about responsible AI. I'm the cautionary tale, the example of what happens when ambition corrupts good intentions. She stood up, gathering her purse and coat with the sharp movements of someone trying to maintain dignity while retreating from a battlefield. Enjoy your moment, Adrian. Enjoy being right and being celebrated for being right. But remember, markets reward efficiency, not ethics. Someone else will build what I built. Probably better, and more subtle. And when they do, you'll realize that all your principles and frameworks and ethical guidelines are just pretty words, unless they're backed by real power. She walked toward the door, then turned back for one last shot. You wanted redemption? Fine. You redeemed yourself. But redemption is a luxury that only winners can afford. I watched her disappear into the San Francisco afternoon, swallowed by the crowds of tech workers and tourists who had no idea they'd just witnessed the final conversation between two siblings, whose rivalry had reshaped an entire industry. My phone buzzed with a notification from Kairo, a user celebrating 6 months of improved mental health, crediting the app with helping them develop genuine coping strategies instead of temporary distractions. Celina was right about one thing. Redemption was a luxury. But she was wrong about who had earned it. The Google X conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Bay Area, but I was too focused on the documents spread across the mahogany table to appreciate the scenery. 23 pages of legal language that would fundamentally alter not just my career, but the entire landscape of mental health technology. Dr. Kavita Rao sat across from me, flanked by 2 lawyers whose combined hourly rate probably exceeded my annual income before the partnership. To my left, David Chen, the IP attorney I'd hired after realizing that handshake agreements wouldn't suffice for deals of this magnitude, reviewed each clause with the methodical precision of someone who understood that details could make or break empire. The licensing terms are comprehensive, David said, his pen hovering over a section marked with yellow highlight. Google gets non-exclusive rights to integrate Kairo's emotional AI framework into their health and wellness products, but you retain full ownership of the core technology and complete creative control over its development. I nodded, still struggling to process the number. The initial licensing fee alone was more money than I'd made in my entire career. The revenue-sharing structure would generate ongoing payments based on user adoption across Google's ecosystem, and the research and development budget they'd allocated for expanding the platform was larger than the market capitalization of most startups. There's also the Innovation Lab component, Dr. Rao added, sliding another document across the table. We're establishing a dedicated research facility focused on ethical AI development, with you as the lead architect, full funding, hand-picked team, complete autonomy over research directions. Think of it as a blank check to build the future of human-centered technology. The lab specification read like something from a science fiction novel. 40 researchers across psychology, neuroscience, computer science, and philosophy, partnerships with major universities and mental health organizations, access to Google's computing infrastructure and user research capabilities, the mandate to develop not just better products, but better principles for how technology should interact with human consciousness. What about regulatory compliance? The FTC is already investigating wellness app practices, and Congress is talking about hearings on digital manipulation techniques. That's actually an advantage for us, one of the lawyers responded. Your ethical framework positions Google ahead of whatever regulations emerge. Instead of scrambling to comply with new rules, we'll be helping to write them. The company that demonstrates ethical leadership early becomes the standard that everyone else has to meet. I thought about Celina's bitter prediction from our coffee shop conversation: markets reward efficiency, not ethics. But sitting in this room, surrounded by people who were betting hundreds of millions of dollars on the opposite proposition, her cynicism felt like the last gasp of an obsolete worldview. "There's one more component we haven't discussed," Rao said, pulling out a tablet and opening what looked like a presentation. "The acquisition option." My stomach tightened. "Acquisition? Not of Kairo directly. You've made it clear that maintaining independence is important to you. But Google is prepared to make a formal offer for the exclusive rights to your research methodology and consulting services. Essentially, we'd be acquiring you while leaving your company intact." The number on the screen made my vision blur slightly. 9-figure, enough money to fund mental health research for decades, to establish foundations and scholarship programs, to ensure that ethical AI development would never again be constrained by financial limitations. "It's not a decision you need to make today," Rao continued, misreading my silence as hesitation, "but the offer will remain open for the next 6 months. Think of it as security, insurance against whatever changes might come to the industry." I looked out the window at the sprawling Silicon Valley landscape, the geography where my sister and I had both built our careers in technology. Somewhere out there, Celina was probably meeting with crisis management consultants and headhunters, trying to salvage a future from the wreckage of her ambitions, while I was being offered the kind of recognition and resources that most entrepreneurs could only dream about. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years I'd been the overlooked younger brother, the one whose quiet work was dismissed as naive and unmarketable. Now I was sitting across from Google's leadership team, being courted with terms that would establish me as one of the most influential technologists of my generation. "I'll need time to review everything," I said finally. "This is more than I expected." "Of course," Dr. Rao smiled. "But Adrian, I want you to understand something. This isn't charity or social responsibility theater. Google doesn't invest hundreds of millions of dollars in feel-good projects. We're doing this because we believe your approach represents the future of technology, not just mental health apps, but the entire relationship between humans and artificial intelligence." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "The industry is at a crossroads. We can continue down the path of manipulation and exploitation that companies like Glowpath pioneered, treating human psychology as a resource to be mined for profit. Or we can choose a different direction, technology that amplifies human potential instead of harvesting human weakness." The weight of what she was describing settled over me like a physical presence. This wasn't just a licensing deal or a career opportunity. It was a chance to define the ethical foundation of an entire technological era. "The choice we make in the next year will determine whether AI becomes humanity's greatest tool or its most sophisticated predator," Dr. Rao continued. "That's why this partnership matters so much. You've already proven that ethical approaches can be more effective than exploitative ones. Now we need to prove they can be more profitable too." I signed the licensing agreement that afternoon, my signature authorizing the largest investment in ethical AI research in history. As we shook hands and exchanged the ritual pleasantries that mark the conclusion of major business deals, I felt something I'd never experienced before: the intoxicating combination of validation and responsibility that comes with being entrusted to shape the future. Walking back to my car through the Google campus, I passed employees working on autonomous vehicles, quantum computers, and renewable energy systems, technologies that would reshape civilization within my lifetime. And now my work would be part of that transformation, integrated into the digital infrastructure that would define how billions of people interacted with artificial intelligence. My phone buzzed with a notification from Kairo, a user message, thanking me for building something that had helped them through the darkest period of their life. A reminder that beneath all the corporate negotiations and industry positioning, the real measure of success remained beautifully simple: had I created something that made people's lives better? The answer for the first time in my career was an unqualified yes. The moving trucks arrived at Celina's Soma loft on a Tuesday morning, their presence announcing what the tech gossip networks had been speculating about for weeks. I learned about it the same way everyone else did, through a leaked photo on TechCrunch, showing boxes labeled personal items, being loaded into a U-Haul van outside the building where my sister had lived since her Series A funding round. The accompanying article was brief, almost perfunctory. Former GlowPath CEO Celina Kim departs San Francisco. No official statement from her PR team. No farewell interview or industry retrospect. Just a quiet confirmation that another fallen tech executive was joining the diaspora of disgraced founders who'd chosen exile over attempted rehabilitation. I stared at the photo for longer than I should have, studying the mundane details of her departure. The boxes looked hastily packed, edges bent and tape applied without the careful precision that had defined everything else about Celina's public image. A lifetime of calculated perfection reduced to cardboard containers and plastic wrap. Part of me wanted to call her. 25 years of sibling rivalry doesn't disappear overnight, and despite everything that had happened, she was still my sister. Still the person who'd taught me how to debug code when I was 12, who'd snuck me into my first startup pitch event, who'd shared my early belief that technology could genuinely improve people's lives, but I didn't call because I'd finally learned the difference between forgiveness and enablement, between family loyalty and complicity and destructive behavior. Celina's exile wasn't a punishment. It was a natural consequence of choices she'd made over years of prioritizing profit over people engagement, over ethics, market dominance over human dignity. Instead, I focused on the work that mattered. The Google partnership had transformed Kairo from a promising startup into a platform that was reshaping how major technology companies approached mental health. Our user base had grown from 10,000 to over 2 million in 6 months. But more importantly, our clinical outcome metrics continued to show genuine improvement in users' psychological well-being. The research lab Kairo had proposed was taking shape in a converted warehouse in Palo Alto, with researchers from Stanford, MIT, and UC Berkeley collaborating on projects that felt like science fiction. Adaptive AI systems that could recognize early signs of mental health crises without compromising user privacy. Therapeutic chatbots trained on decades of successful therapy sessions, offering personalized support without the manipulative engagement patterns that had defined the previous generation of wellness apps. Most satisfying was the industry-wide shift we were witnessing. The congressional hearings on digital manipulation had concluded with bipartisan recommendations for mental health app regulation. The FTC was developing new guidelines for psychological data protection. Venture capital firms were quietly updating their due diligence checklists to include ethical impact assessment. The changes weren't universal. There were still companies trying to replicate GlowPath's manipulative strategies, entrepreneurs who saw the exposed psychological exploitation techniques as features rather than bugs. But they were operating in an increasingly hostile environment, facing regulatory scrutiny and public skepticism that made ethical alternatives like Kairo more attractive to investors and users alike. My phone rang. Marcus Rodriguez, the marathon runner whose photo I'd shown Celina during our final coffee shop conversation. Adrian? I hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to let you know, I got into the Boston Marathon. They accepted my application for the mental health advocacy team. I smiled, leaning back in my desk chair. That's incredible, Marcus. Congratulations. I wanted to thank you again for building Kairo. I know it sounds dramatic, but your app literally saved my life. 2 years ago, I couldn't leave my apartment without having panic attacks. Now I'm running marathons to raise money for suicide prevention. The difference is, it's everything. After hanging up, I walked to the window of my new office, a corner space in the renovated warehouse that served as Kairo's headquarters. The San Francisco skyline stretched out before me, glass towers reflecting the afternoon sun like a constellation of possibility. Somewhere in that urban maze, thousands of people were using technology I'd built to understand themselves better, to process difficult emotions, to develop genuine resilience instead of artificial coping mechanisms. The irony wasn't lost on me. Celina had called my work stupid and digital hand-holding, dismissing the very idea that technology could meaningfully address human emotional needs. She'd been so focused on building an empire that she'd forgotten why empires were worth building in the first place. To create something that outlasted its creators, something that made the world genuinely better. Now she was gone, vanished into whatever post-Silicon Valley existence she was constructing for herself. The tech blogs had moved on to newer scandals and fresher controversy. Her name appeared in case studies about ethical failures and regulatory compliance, but rarely in conversations about innovation or industry leadership. Meanwhile, Kairo continued to grow, not through manipulative engagement tactics or addictive design patterns, but through word-of-mouth recommendations from users whose lives had been genuinely improved. We were proving that ethical technology could be more successful than exploitative alternatives, that treating users with respect and dignity was more profitable than mining their psychological vulnerabilities. The vindication was complete, but it felt different than I'd expected. There was no triumph, no satisfaction at my sister's downfall, just a quiet sense of completion, the feeling that comes from finally being able to do the work you were meant to do without interference or sabotage. My computer chimed with a calendar reminder: TED Talk rehearsal in 30 minutes. Tomorrow I would stand on the same stage where tech luminaries had unveiled world-changing ideas, sharing my vision for the future of human-centered AI with an audience of millions. The title of my talk, Building Technology That Builds Us Up. It would be the largest platform I'd ever had, the most important presentation of my career. But unlike Celina's performances, it wouldn't be about self-promotion or market positioning. It would be about the responsibility that comes with the power to shape human consciousness through code, about choosing empathy over engagement, about building technology that served human flourishing instead of corporate quarterly reports. As I gathered my presentation materials and headed toward the rehearsal studio, I thought about the binary choice Dr. Rao had described months earlier: technology as humanity's greatest tool or its most sophisticated predator. Celina had chosen predator, building systems that fed on human vulnerability and weakness. She'd achieved remarkable success by that metric, creating an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars and earning recognition as one of the industry's most innovative entrepreneurs. But empires built on exploitation always crumble eventually, and innovators who mistake manipulation for innovation always find themselves replaced by people who understand the difference. I had chosen tool, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. The TED Talk stage felt smaller than I'd expected, a red circle of carpet surrounded by darkness and the weight of 3,000 people holding their breath. The lights were hot against my face, but my hands weren't shaking anymore. That surprised me. 6 months ago, presenting to 15 people at Demo Day had left me sweating through my shirt. Now, facing an audience that included Nobel laureates, Fortune 500 CEOs, and the kind of thought leaders who shaped global conversations, I felt calm, centered, ready. 5 years ago I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. My sister called my life's work stupid, a ripple of laughter from the audience. But I wasn't going for comedy, I was going for truth. She wasn't entirely wrong. By Silicon Valley standards, building technology that prioritizes user well-being over engagement metrics is pretty stupid. Creating AI that helps people become more emotionally intelligent instead of more psychologically dependent is terrible business strategy. Designing apps that measure success by whether users need them less over time, that's not just stupid, it's financial suicide. I clicked to my first slide, showing Kairo's user retention curve. Instead of the hockey stick growth that venture capitalists salivated over, it showed something unprecedented: a gradual decline as users developed genuine coping skills and relied less heavily on digital support. This is what failure looks like in the traditional tech economy. Users who graduate from needing your product, engagement metrics that decrease as mental health outcomes improve, revenue models that shrink as people get healthier. Another click. The next slide showed our clinical outcome data: statistically significant improvements in anxiety, depression, and emotional regulation across demographic groups. This is what success looks like in the human economy. Technology that amplifies our capacity for growth instead of exploiting our capacity for addiction. AI that teaches emotional intelligence instead of mining emotional vulnerability. Digital tools that build resilience instead of harvesting dependence. I could see faces in the front rows now, the intense attention that comes when an audience realizes they're hearing something genuinely important. Dr. Rao was there, smiling with the satisfaction of someone whose bet on an unlikely outcome was paying off spectacularly. Next to her sat Sundar Pichai, Google's CEO, the man whose personal endorsement had transformed my ethical framework from philosophical proposition into industry standard. The choice we face isn't between profitable technology and ethical technology. It's between short-term extraction and long-term value creation, between building systems that consume human potential and systems that cultivate it. I clicked to a slide showing the broader ecosystem we'd helped create. Mental health apps that had adopted our ethical guideline, research partnerships between tech companies and psychology departments, regulatory frameworks that protected user autonomy while encouraging genuine innovation. When we designed Kairo, we didn't set out to transform an industry, we just wanted to build something that actually helped people. But it turns out that when you optimize for human flourishing instead of corporate metrics, something remarkable happens. You create more value for everyone involved. The next slide showed our latest partnership announcements. Integration with major healthcare systems, licensing deals with pharmaceutical companies developing digital therapeutics, a research collaboration with the World Health Organization to address global mental health challenges. Ethical technology isn't just morally superior, it's economically superior. It creates sustainable competitive advantages, builds genuine customer loyalty, and attracts the kind of talent and investment that drives long-term success. The companies that understand this first will define the next decade of technological development. I paused, looking out at the audience, thinking about all the conversations and conferences and pitch meetings that had led to this moment, about Celina's dismissive laughter at demo day, and her bitter predictions during our final coffee shop conversation, about Eli's courage in documenting systematic exploitation, and Dr. Rao's vision for what AI could become. My sister was right about one thing: markets do reward efficiency, but she was wrong about what efficiency means in the context of human consciousness. The most efficient way to improve mental health isn't to create dependency on digital tools, it's to help people develop the internal resources they need to thrive independently. I clicked to the final slide, showing Kairo's mission statement: technology that teaches rather than hooks, heals rather than harvests, elevates rather than exploits. The future of AI isn't about building smarter machines, it's about building technology that makes us more fully human, that amplifies our capacity for empathy, creativity, and genuine connection, that helps us become the people we're capable of being, rather than the consumers we're convenient to be. The standing ovation started before I finished speaking, a wave of sound that seemed to rise from the very architecture of the theater. But what moved me wasn't the applause, it was the quality of attention I could feel in the room, the sense that something important had been communicated and received. As I walked off stage, my phone was already buzzing with notifications, interview requests from major media outlets, partnership inquiries from companies I'd only read about in business school, case studies, investment offers that would have seemed surreal just 2 years ago. But the message that mattered most came from Marcus Rodriguez, watching your TED Talk from the Boston Marathon finish line. Just completed 2 miles of gratitude for the technology that helped me believe in myself again. You're changing the world, one mind at a time. Backstage, Dr. Rao was waiting with champagne and a smile that could have powered the entire auditorium. That, she said, was the most important presentation in the history of technology ethics. You just made conscious AI the default expectation for an entire generation of entrepreneurs and investors. I thought about Celina, wherever she was, probably watching the live stream and processing the reality that her little brother had just redefined the industry she'd once dominated. I wondered if she understood yet that her dismissal of my work hadn't been market insight. It had been the kind of profound blindness that comes from mistaking exploitation for innovation. The vindication was complete, but it felt different than I'd imagined. There was no satisfaction in her downfall, no pleasure in being proven right, just a quiet sense of completion, the feeling that comes from finally being able to do the work you were meant to do without interference or sabotage. Later that evening, sitting in my hotel room overlooking the Vancouver harbor, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not code this time, but words, the first chapter of a book I'd been thinking about for months, The Conscious Machine, Building AI That Serves Human Flourish. The opening line wrote itself. The question isn't whether artificial intelligence will change humanity, it's whether we'll use it to become more human or less human. Outside my window, the city lights reflected off the water like scattered stars, each one representing thousands of people navigating the complex intersection of technology and consciousness. Somewhere among them were Kairo users developing genuine emotional intelligence, researchers building more ethical AI systems, entrepreneurs choosing empathy over exploitation. The war for the soul of technology wasn't over. It would continue for decades as each new innovation forced us to choose between our better and worse angels. But for the first time in my career, I was confident about which side would ultimately win, because it turns out that building technology that makes people more fully human isn't stupid at all. It's the smartest thing you can do, and I had the rest of my life to prove it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.